So in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to decorate an old coffee jar. So a bit of upcycling. Now I've used a couple of moulds in this particular one. So these are from Prima marketing. So we have the beautiful one here that's got the borders on, and then we have the other one here that has got the magnificent frame and some other flourishes on there as well. Now I've already taken the cast of the border and here it is here. Now you'll see what I've done. I've actually distorted it. So basically after I had applied the clay into the mould, I then popped it in the freezer for about half an hour. Then when I pulled it out, you get a perfect impression of the actual border there, or the frame. So I then made sure that once I'd taken it out of the mould, when it was actually still a little bit damp, I then positioned it and moulded it to the shape of the glass jar that we're going to be decorating. Now for the top part, I then went and created this extremely long border. Now if we actually bring the mould back in, you'll see that if I flatten this one out, okay, it actually goes beyond the mould. So I'll show you first of all how I created this part of the decoration. So I'm going to be using a Prima redesign mould here, the one with a border. Now this technique is only going to work if the actual pattern within the part of the mould you're using is repeated. So as you can see, this one here, and this is the one we're going to be using, has got a nice repeat of those indentations every so often. The same here with the hearts. As you can see, that's an exact copy there as it is there, there and there, etc. It's not necessarily going to work on this type of design here, or indeed this one here. Right, so first of all what you need to do is just get some corn flour on a brush and then just sweep that into the mould, just dust it out, okay? Make sure you then tap out the mould just to make sure there's not too much corn flour still stuck in there, because that will affect the impression of the clay. Now the clay I'm going to be using is paper air drying clay, okay, and I've just coloured it pink just so you can see what's actually going on in this tutorial. So just press that out into the mould, okay, using your fingers to really press down there and make sure that you get all the detail of the mould. When you're happy that you've actually pressed that down pretty much as well as you can, then just use a nylon rolling pin and just go over that. That's really just going to flatten the back, and just press it down a little bit more. If you have any overspill of the clay, then simply just get rid of that. I'm using a Dresden tool here, it's a cake decorating tool, but you could be using your fingers or indeed a craft ball tool. Basically anything that's not sharp and is going to damage the mould you're working with. So just tidy that up the best you possibly can, okay, like so. And then once you're happy you've tied that up, it's just a case of just pressing down just to make sure you've got everything in place, and then flexing the mould, okay, like so, and then just taking that border out. So that is the border as it stands, but I now want to make that longer. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to turn it back over. You do have to be quite careful at this point, and then just place one of these nodules back into the mould, into one of those within the mould, so the indentation in the mould. So don't press too hard at the moment. Get some more of paper air drying clay, and again just pop that into the mould as well next to it. Okay, so we're just going to press that into there and then press it into the part that you've already made. Okay, so it's like so. So I'm just going to continue right to the end here, so a little bit more clay just in the very end of the mould, and like we did before, just going to roll the clay using our nylon rolling pin just to make sure that's really nice and flat. Okay, so just keep on pressing down. Once again, using the Dresden tool, your fingers or a ball tool, just go all the way around, just neaten that up. It's just going to make it easier to work with once it's actually dried. Okay, so again just press all the way there. Now paying attention to the area that we actually joined, okay, just press that down and don't sort of go beyond that point. So just make sure that you're pressing down at just that particular point just there. Okay, Then once you get to that spot, then it's just a case of grabbing the item, and now you have an extended version of that particular border. So you can see now it's a lot longer. Then what you need to do before that's actually dried, just get your glass jar that you're decorating and then just wrap it round. Okay, so just wrap that round, and you'll see obviously this one in particular is a little bit on the long side. Okay, now with paper air drying clay you're going to get shrinkage of about 10%. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use some scissors. I'm not going to cut it exactly where it overlaps. I'm going to go a little bit beyond, just to make sure that once it's actually shrunk, the border is not going to be too short. Okay, so just gently just wrap that round. Okay, don't actually press because it will stick to itself, and then just let that dry overnight. For other parts of the glass jar, we're going to be using embossing folders to actually create the decoration. Now this particular one has got the word love on, okay, but you can also be using pattern designs, whatever you have in your crafting stash. Now if you're going to be using one with the letters on like I have here, or words, then you just want to make sure they're the right way round. So first of all we're going to get ourselves some clay, okay, some paper air drying clay again. I'm just going to roll that out to about 1 millimetre thick. Okay, so just go onto your non-stick mat and then just roll that out. Basically we want the sort of size that's just going to fit onto that embossing folder. You don't want it too thin and you don't want it too thick, but about 1 millimetre is going to be good. So just keep on turning that round until you get a nice consistency all the way through that is about 1 millimetre thick. I'm just going to quickly grab our embossing folder just to make sure we've got enough, which we just need a little bit more. Okay, so just keep on rolling that out. Okay, now just lift your clay up, get your embossing folder, and just make sure that the word love, when you actually emboss into it, is actually back to front. Okay, so the words have got to be back to front. That's the side that you actually want to press the clay into. So just position the clay over the top of your embossing folder like so, and then just start to rock, there we go, the rolling pin just back and forth. Don't go too heavy, as you can see I'm just lifting it up. Okay, so just back and forth, back and forth. Okay, then once you've basically rolled it out over the entire embossing folder, then you can go a little bit heavier. Okay, but don't go all the way, just do that rocking motion like I showed you in the first instance. Okay, it's just all the way. Okay, once you've done that, then where the overspill is, that's where this comes in really handy now. Then just grab that and then just very, very carefully just take that off, and you can see you now have a perfect impression of the embossing folder. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to trim that slightly because we can still use all of the clay that's not actually got any of the wording on again. And as you can see, when it's in this stage, it's quite difficult to handle. It can be quite difficult to handle. So just trim that, okay, all the way around, and then just let that dry. If it's a really nice day, it's probably going to take about between 2 and 3 hours, but if you want to, you can just leave that overnight. Now it is going to be still quite flexible because it is thin, but if you do want to, you can just let that dry around the glass object that you want to decorate. So that's our words love. So I want a pattern as well, so I'm going to be using a different embossing folder for this one. So like we did before, just get yourself some air drying clay, pop that onto your non-stick mat, and then just start rolling that out to about 1 millimetre in thickness. Just keep on lifting it and turning it just to make sure it's not going to stick. Okay, so just keep on until you've got a piece that's large enough for your needs. Okay. So it can be any colour clay, by the way, because at the end of the day we're going to be painting over this. So if you've got any scraps of clay where you possibly think, goodness, I don't know what I'm going to use it for, then this is the ideal type of thing that you can be doing. So there is our clay all rolled out. Again, we're just going to look at the embossing folder, and we're going to want the side where the actual pattern is indented into that. Okay, so that's the side you want to go for. That will give you a raised surface. You can use the other side, then that's going to give you sort of like a deboss. So just decide what side that you want to use the pattern from. So just position your clay like we did before on the one with the word love, and just see if that's large enough. That's going to be good for me. And then it's just that slight rocking process, okay, just to press the clay in. Let's just lift that up a little bit. Okay, so rocking process, back and forth, and then we'll be good to go. So once you've got to the top, then add just a little bit more pressure all the way down, back and forth, like so. And then once you're done, again, with these scraps that go over the top, they're going to help you actually pull that off. So there you can see we have a beautiful impression of that particular texture as well. Again, just chop off the clay that's around the outside there that hasn't got any pattern on. That can be used again for another part of your project. So before you go any further, what you need to do is use some gesso. It can be white, black, transparent, whatever you like, to actually go over the entire jar. So I'm just going to use some transparent gesso, but basically it does leave it with a milky finish anyway. So we're just going to go onto there, and then we're just going to apply that evenly all over our jar. So once the gesso has dried, and it was entirely up to you what you use, I've got lots of transparent gesso that I want to use up, but you could indeed be using white or black. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to paint the entire jar now with white acrylic paint. The reason I'm using white acrylic paint is I've got some delicate rice paper designs that are going to go on top, and I want the images to show through. So let's get painting with some white acrylic paint. So I applied the second coat of the white acrylic paint to the jar, so we're all good to go for the next part. Now I'm just going to use the mould here actually to steady the jar so it doesn't roll back and forth, so it's really good for that. So the rice paper I'm going to be using is this beautiful image here. Okay, so what I want to do is to basically place this on in the position where we want it, which is there. As I mentioned, I basically popped this out of the mould straight onto the glass, so it took the shape of the glass. So I want the angel's face sort of like in the middle there. So I'm just going to place that onto the glass and then sort of get an idea of where it needs to go. So I'm pressing down on the mould so I know that's the shape that we've actually got. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a pencil to draw around the outer part of the mould, and I'll explain why I'm doing the outer. If I did the inner, then you're probably more likely to see it when it's actually glued in, but as I'm drawing around the outer part, then what I intend to do is when I actually cut it to size, I'm just going to go slightly inside of that line, so it would be hidden by the actual moulded frame. So there we go. Let's just see if we can see that. We can indeed. So I'm just going to use a pair of scissors just to cut around that. Okay, let me just pop that aside, and then we're just going to cut this out. Let me see if I can see the shape there. Yep. Okay, let's just go around then. Like I say, I'm just going to cut just very, very slightly inside. Doesn't matter if it goes over a little bit because it probably will be hidden anyway with the paint or the texture paste that I'm going to use around it anyway. So I'm just going to go up to there, round to there, and that's sort of it. So I'm just going to make sure that's going to fit on there still. So just cut all the way around. Okay, so just pop that aside. You can probably use some of the wording on there for another project. So bring our jar back in. I'm going to look for like the whitest possible area on there, just so once we actually apply it, nothing will be showing through. So let me just, again, just stick that on there, pop our moulded area on. So that's the sort of look they're actually after. Again, just make sure that there's not too much hanging out from over the edges, and then we'll stick that down. So that's stuck there. Okay, so I just need to trim a little bit more off just to be on the safe side. Okay, so let me just quickly do that. So just a couple of millimeters all the way around. Like I said, I'm a little bit undecided what I'm going to do to the rest of the jar, so I just don't want any of the rice paper actually hanging out. So again, just pop that on to the jar, and then pop our moulded piece back on there. So that's about right there. Okay, so just make sure that everything is exactly as you want it. Okay, and then grab yourself some masking tape. I'm just going to have to look for my masking tape because I've moved it, or you can use washi tape and then just stick the rice paper just into position so it doesn't move any. Okay, so carefully just remove that. Okay, let's just stick that into position. So I'm just going to detack it just very slightly, and then we're just going to stick that on there. Again, just make sure that nothing has really moved. Okay, which is good. Okay, so we're just going to pop that back, and then we're going to be using some decoupage glue. So I'm just using one from Pentart. It can be one from anybody. So let's just undo that, and then we'll glue that into position. So let's just grab a brush. Okay, we're going to go onto the glass itself. Okay, so just go all the way onto there, making sure that you've got plenty on there, and then just flip that back, just run that along the center, and then again just apply the decoupage glue over the top, because it acts as a varnish as well. And now is the point just to remove that little bit of masking tape that was holding everything into position. So just go over that, just make sure that's going to really stick on there nicely. It's not going to come off. Okay, so as you can see, that has gone to the shape really nicely. Okay, just going to go for one more coat as well. So although it's going on sort of like milky, it will dry completely clear, so don't worry about that. Most decoupage varnishes or glues are exactly the same. Okay, so just keep on going over. Okay, and then we're just going to let that one dry, and then we'll come back and we'll add on the frame around it and some other elements as well. So what I've done, I've painted the moulded areas completely brown. Even though they are pink on the back, doesn't matter, so that's not going to show. But I've painted all those 2 coats of brown now. At this point, I could go over that with some gilding paints, but it just really does depend how confident you are with a paintbrush when everything is in situ. I'm pretty confident I'll be able to do it, but if not, then you can just go over that part now. So for me, I'm going to stick this part to our glass jar. So I'm going to use a 3D gloss gel. So that's a really good glue. So I'm just going to pop that onto the back there. You don't actually need that much of this stuff. I'm just going to use an old brush. In actual fact, it's the same brush I used for my gilding paints as well. So just go all the way around there. Be sure to get all the little areas because you want that to stick really nicely. Okay, so just go all the way around. Okay, maybe I just need a little bit more of that onto there, and then we'll just stick that into position. Okay, so you want to make sure there's not going to be that much spilling out, so just make sure that when you actually paint it on, it's a pretty thin coat, but obviously enough to actually hold that into position. Okay, so just go right to the edge of some of the little bits that could potentially just come up. Okay, now we're just going to flip that over and look where your bottom of the image is and sort of like aim for lining that up first. Okay, and then you can just wiggle it about. So just want a little bit of a hair showing. Okay, there we go. So I have got myself some cling film, so I'm just going to fold that in half just to make that a little bit stronger, and just carefully just wrap it over the clay part that you want to keep in position. Then from behind, just start to twist that. Make sure nothing's actually moved on that side, and then just keep twisting round like so. And then I'm just going to use an elastic band to keep that knot in position. Okay, like so. I'm just going to leave that probably for about half an hour, and then our clay piece will be set nicely on there, and then we can carry on decorating and adding the next part that would be this bit up here on the neck of the jar. So I've just readjusted the cling film here just so it's really tight on these outer parts of the cast that we made from the mould. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to fill in a little bit just here on the neck, because this piece here, when it goes round, it's a little bit loose and it's going to go inwards. So I'm just wanting to build up the actual dimension there of this pot. So what I'm going to use for that is a 3D fibre paste from Redesign. So literally I'm just going to grab some out there and then just quite simply just go around the neck of the jar. Okay, so it is just making it so the neck of the jar is just all one level, and then it'll be easier to stick the other moulded elements actually onto. The fibre paste is really good, and it gives a nice smooth finish as well. So I'm just going to go all the way around that. I'm just working on the edge of this particular mould, so I can just keep on twisting it round as well. So just keep on going all the way. The fibre paste is one of those products that it is very strong once it's actually hardened, but it will take sort of like overnight for it to harden properly. So I'm just going to keep on going all the way around, and I'm just going to go around with a little bit of water just to smooth it off a little bit more. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to spray some water on there as well, and then that's going to just make it a little bit easier to actually smooth the paste. You can sand it once it's actually dry if you wish, but I just find it a little bit easier to actually just spray it and then smooth it down whilst it's still wet. Okay, so I'm just going to go all the way around. Okay, if there's any excess, then just wipe that off now. And likewise on the top, just smooth that around and just remove any waste. And just go back in there and just re-smooth it until you're happy with the final finish. So now the top of the jar part has dried, I'm just going to stick this clay element around as well. Now the join I want to be at the front here, purely because I'm going to put a heart over the join so you don't see it, so it's going to be something like that. So first of all, I'm just going to wrap that round and see where I need to actually cut it. So let's just pull that a little bit taut, which is about there. Now I'm just going to use a craft knife just to cut down there. Okay, and let's just take that off, and then just using a pair of scissors, find the mark and just cut all the way through. Okay, right, let's pop that back on just to make sure that it is going to fit, and we're good to go. There we go, that was a pretty good fit. Okay, so now I'm just going to glue that. I'm just going to use a little bit of the 3D gloss gel. Okay, so I'm just going to apply a little bit of that onto the reverse side. Okay, and then just spread that using the brush all the way around, and then that's going to hold that into position. Just keep on going all the way around, making sure you've got plenty on there. Okay, just a little tap more, and then just onto there. Okay, that should do us. Okay, just make sure we've got a little at the end, and so I'm going to pop that round there. And as I said, I want the join directly above the centre point of this decoration here. Okay, so let's just clean off. Oh, just taking off a little bit of the paint. It doesn't matter, so I'm going to go back over that. Okay, now I'm stretching it a little bit. I can cut just a tad more off there. Okay, which is about that much. And let's just twist that round. So we've got the heart. It's going to cover that. Okay, just have a look at it from all angles to see you're good, which we are just there. And then, like we did before with the main element down here, we're just going to use a bit of cling film. So again, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to fold it on itself like so, and then just tie that all the way around. And once again, just keep on checking nothing's moved, and then twist that as we did before. Okay, I think we should be able to anchor it down there quite nicely. Okay, so that's going to hold that into position. We're going to let that one fully dry, and then when we come back we can start using the other elements that we made. First of all, using the embossing folders, which were these beautiful textures. So we're going to be using one of those, which is a texture, and then we have got the word love that we're going to use as well. Not too sure how we're going to do that yet, but probably we're going to do a little bit of ripping of this and sticking onto some of this. We'll see when we get back, but in the meantime we're going to leave that one to dry. Right, so I'm just going to take off the elastic bands and the cling film here, and hopefully with a bit of luck everything should still be in place. Okay, so let's just have a quick look, and then we can see if we can move on to the next stage. Well, everything is pretty much nicely in place. So the next stage is actually putting together some texture around the whole jar itself. So I've got these that I made first off. Not really sure how I'm going to put them on, to be honest with you, apart from we will be using the 3D gloss gel to actually apply them. So let's have a look. So we've got the word love. I feel the words love, because there's lots of them on there, as you can see. Maybe they just need to go around there. Now, because this is basically a paper clay, it does act pretty much like paper in the fact that you can tear it. So that's what I'm going to do at the moment, just to add a little bit of interest to that. Admittedly, I'm not sure whether any of this torn edge is going to be shown once it's stuck on, but we will see when we come to that stage. So I'm just going to do it randomly, okay, at the moment. And again, just tear that on all the edges just to make it look a bit more distressed. So that's sort of like the look we're after. So yeah, maybe I'm going to stick that round there. So we're going to use the 3D gloss gel again. Okay, so just going to apply a little bit to that. Not sure how well this is going to stick on each piece. We may have to put the cling film around it to hold it in place. We shall soon see. This is pretty good glue, but these are quite long bits as well, and because they haven't been dried on the curve, they may have a tendency to try to go back to their original straight shape. Okay, let's just pop that one on. What I'm going to do there, I think I'm going to tear it a little bit more at an angle, so it's like tucking into the shape of that frame. So let's just pop that on. Now, because it's got text, I really do want to make sure the best I possibly can that is straight. And that glue does seem to be holding pretty well, so I'm quite pleased with that. Just press that on. Okay, so that's the first piece done. We've also got this other texture here. Maybe that's going to work in some other way. Maybe I'll just do all the love words first. Okay, so again, just going to tear that. Hopefully, like I say, we will see that nice torn edge, but there's no guarantee, because I'm going to be using a product I haven't used before, which is the plaster paste from Finnabair. Okay, so let's have a look. Well, maybe let's have a look. Maybe we'll pop that on this side. We'll sort of like work backwards. Okay, so just tear that off, and again, just use a 3D gloss gel just to stick that down to the jar as well. Okay, right, well, I'm going to carry on with this, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how I've glued all of the other elements on too. So I'm just sticking one of these texture bits on. So as you can see, I'm just pulling the paper clay round quite successfully actually. You've got quite a bit of control how that's going to tear. So I'm just making it a little bit more random as I go along, which is quite nice. You can fit that into near enough any shape you want. So it's really handy that you can tear it so well. So I'm just going to, I think, near enough place that onto there. Okay. And the glue is holding up pretty well. So I'm pretty pleased so far, but you know, the proof will be on the final brush stroke and see what it looks like then. Okay, so just going to stick that one down. So I am running out of our beloved 3D gloss gel at the moment from the tube, so I've opened it up and I'm getting as much of it as I possibly can out of there, and there's loads actually, so that's good. Obviously we don't want to overload it so it all squeezes out, but we want enough just to make sure that these paper clay elements are going to stick onto our glass jar and not come off. Okay, so we're just about done. This is the final piece and I'll show you what I've actually done. So I'm just going to place that one down, and you've got quite a bit of wiggle time on that if you want to trim it any more. Okay, so just press that down and we're pretty good to go. Okay, so I'm just going to turn that round so you can see we've got a little bit of the words love there, we've got a little bit of that beautiful pattern going on, we've got the bigger word love, and it sort of goes like that. So in between here I'm hopefully going to fill in using this product here, which is the plaster paste from Finibet. Never ever used it before, so it could be quite interesting how it looks actually on the vase, filling in all those spaces around. Okay, so we're going to start applying that plaster paste. So let's just take the lid off. Ooh, okay, it's quite a thick consistency, which is good. I'm going to give it a little bit of a stir, because like I say, I've never ever used it before. It does seem to be a bit more liquidy towards the bottom. So hopefully this is going to give us a really nice texture. Okay, so it's quite gloopy, as you can see. I'm sure if you wanted to, you could actually put that through a stencil, and also probably you could add a little bit of acrylic paint to it as well and add your own colour. So I'm going to, let's see, probably apply with a palette knife to start with, and we'll see how we go. Okay, so I'm just going to fill in basically where these, I say cracks, but basically where the texture doesn't quite go all the way. Okay, so we're just filling in the bits in between the paper clay pieces. So I don't think, like I say, we're going to see any of that torn edge, sadly, but we're still going to see a textured edge from this. Let me just pop that there. I could also go in with a palette knife that's smaller, like my other one there, or indeed a paint brush. So I think, you know, it's going to work quite nicely. And doing it in like a dabbing technique, of course you're going to add a little bit more texture to the overall finish as well. I'm thinking, because this has got probably quite a lot of water content in, it's going to take a little bit of time to dry. So possibly we may do this in a couple of different sittings, because I have a feeling that I'm not going to be able to turn the jar too much. Okay, so I'm just going to turn it around this way, and this is where this mould underneath, as you can see here, is really good, because it holds it just where I want it. So we're adding a little bit of texture into our plaster paste by just doing the dabbing technique. So I'm just going to carry on with this. Okay, it's quite a slow process, but hopefully it will be worthwhile. So leave me to it, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how far I've got before we leave it for the next part. So there is all of the plaster work on the bits I can possibly get to today. There's definitely now a case of just stepping back from it and letting it do its thing, just let it dry. And then once that's done, I'm probably just going to go a little bit more on the base just to bring that plaster round, and possibly some on the top bit here, and then it will be time to paint it. So step away from it and come back to it. So the plaster paste is all dry now, and what's a little bit surprising is the fact that it's actually cracked in some places as well. But I think that's possibly down to the fact that the clay pieces underneath have actually dried at a different rate to the plaster paste, so we have some really nice cracks. So what I'm going to do now is just paint the entire jar using some Impasto paints, and then I'll start doing some more techniques over the top once that's dried. Right, I've got some Impasto paints here. I first of all thought burlap was going to work quite nicely. It may do as a dry brush over the top, but I think probably it's these two that are going to build up most of the colour. So this is the Victorian green and the linen. I think they're going to work rather nicely. Now impasto paints are really a thick paint, so when you first put them on, okay, you can see that's not going anywhere. It's really thick. So what I tend to do is just spray them down with a little bit of water, and then they'll go on really nicely. Okay, so we just want to go over that lettering. It could be that we do 2 coats, but the impasto paint is pretty thick. I'm actually going to use a smaller brush here just to make sure we get into all of those little nooks and crannies, especially as the plaster paste has actually cracked in some places as well. So I'm just going to go over the entire jar using that, and I'm just going to keep on spraying it just to make it a little bit easier to spread that paint as well. So there we go. I'm going to do the whole jar, and then we'll come back and we'll have a look at what the next stage is going to be. As you may notice, I have now brought in my messy glass mat, because the next step is going to get a little bit messy. So what we're going to do, we're going to tone this down, but let's just have a look and see what we've actually got. So you can see all of the lettering there still, you can see the beautiful texture. So everything is looking, yeah, it's not too bad at the moment, but let's see what we can do to possibly make it look a little bit better. So I'm going to use some impasto paints here on the side, and this time I'm just going to add some black to that as well. Okay, so quite a little bit of the black. We're then going to make a little bit of a mix there. So what we're looking for is the 2 tones mixed together to form quite a dark, sort of like a green. At the moment it's looking more like a grey, so I think we're going to add some more of the green in there. Okay, so let's just add a little bit more. Okay, and again just mix that in until you get a consistent colour throughout. Okay, so just keep on mixing it. As I said, the impasto paints are quite thick, so make sure you add plenty of water to this mix. It's one of those ones where we're going to basically paint it on and then near enough wipe it off straight away. Let's have a look. Okay, right, so keep on mixing that in. And do you know what, I think we probably will go more on the dark side. Okay, because I don't think there's going to be much of a variance if we just leave that as is, but as long as some of the green tones are still coming through, then we should be good to go. So just keep on mixing that in, I say, until you get a consistent colour throughout of the whole mix. Okay, so once we've got to that stage, at the moment I can see that is still going to be way too thick, so I'm going to add quite a lot of water into that as well. Okay, so now we're pretty good to go. Okay, so literally it's just a case of painting it on like so. Okay, and then near enough, then just wiping it off. Okay, that's the sort of effect we want. You can see even when it's actually got some on the cloth there, that's going to help as well. So literally wipe it on and then wipe it off. Okay, and that's going to give you that sort of like aged look. Where it's looking pristine at the moment, this is going to give that nice sort of like aged look to it. So just keep on going around that. Okay, so I'm going to go over the whole jar in that particular type of process, and then I'll show you what it looks like after. So I've just gone over the entire lot just to give it that sort of like aged and more of a distressed look. So now it's not that perfect green at all. And you can see all of the detail is really showing through rather nicely at the moment. So what I'm going to do next is go on with just purely our green impasto paint, and I'm just going to bring out some of the highlights, and likewise probably go back in and just add a little bit more of the darkness around some of these bits as well. So you may also notice that on the actual framework I've gone over using the same colour just to tone that in as well, and I think that works rather nicely as well. So I'm just using a baby wipe here. It is quite a dry baby wipe, but it's quite good because these particular types of cloth, they don't tend to just go to pieces when they're wet. So that's really quite nice that that works so well. Okay, so I'm just looking around there, seeing if I've got any light bits that I have there. So again, just pop the brush just into there, so we don't want any bits like that showing, and then again just wipe it over. So even the fact that the cloth now is completely saturated with that colour is no bad thing, because it's just like adding to the aging process quite nicely. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so that's really toned down nicely. I'm quite pleased with that. So like I say, now I'm just going to go over with a lighter colour and just bring out some of that detail. So it's a real dry brush type of technique. So I've just mixed in some black with our colour there that we did the dark wash with. Okay, so I'm just going to do some dry brushing on here, just using the darkest possible colour that we have. So just probably just around the edges. I'm not going to go too wild with the dark. Okay, so just brush that in areas, particularly sort of like round the frame there. Okay, and then what we'll do, we'll just go over also with some of the lighter green as well. So that's what I'm doing just there. Okay, so just to add a little bit more to the aged look. So now I'm just going to add a little bit of the green, which is that Victorian green. So I've just made sure my brush is dry. So I'm just going to do a little bit of dry brushing just with this. So just again, just make sure you've got hardly any paint actually on your brush, and it's just picking up on the highlight. So the lighter the brush strokes, you can build the colour up just by going over it a few times. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. So when you first do it, you're probably not going to see much of that colour going on, but it's all about just building up and aging the aging process. Okay, so just on the highlights, so you can see how little I've actually got there on the mat to be working with, but it is just a case of just building it up just very slowly. So now I've come to the bit that I enjoy the most, and that's the gilding part. So the two gilding paints I'm going to be using are from Cadence. We've got the antique gold and the antique copper. I'm not going to bother with the silver because I don't want really too much to sort of like jump out at you. I want it to be quite subdued, so these colours will work rather nicely. So I'm just going to pop a little dab onto there. Okay, and I've got my dry brushing brush, which is pretty well worn out now, and I'm just going to go on to there. I'm using the mould to actually underneath to actually hold the jar while I actually do the gilding. So literally just going to start to build up some of that colour. We're not going to go too heavy. Like I say, it's all about knowing just how much you want to put on there. Okay, so just build that up nicely. So I'm just going to go with the gold first, and also what I'm going to do, I'm going to gild the jar over as well, just to add a little couple of highlights here and there, just to add a little bit of sparkle. Okay. So making sure that when you apply the gilding paint that you get onto the corner or the edges of the moulded areas as well as the raised surfaces. Okay, just build up the colour just by going over a couple of times. Okay, so you can see quite quickly we're getting that nice shine to it. And turn that round. You can see how little of the paint I'm actually using just to build that up. So I'm going to carry on with this part of the process, and then I'll be back to show you all the gilded pieces finished. So I finished the gold gilding, and you can see all of the detail has really now popped, which is exactly what we want. So I'm just going to go in with the copper now, so a little bit of the copper onto there. So I've done all the gilding all of the way around, so you can see the beautiful effect that actually gives. So what I'm going to do now is just probably add some floral pieces, just possibly going over the board. I really want to see what it looks like, and obviously I've still got to put the heart on the top there just to conceal that join of the borders. So I'm just going to move our main piece aside. So I'm using another mould here. This is another Prima redesign, so I'm just going to put some clay in. I've already dusted this out with some corn flour, so I'm just going to pop some of the air drying clay in there, and we're just going to see what that actually looks like. Okay, so just go all the way around, tuck the clay in to all the crevices within the moulds, just really press that down to confirm that it's in all of the leaves and all of the floral parts as well. Okay, so just need a little bit more just there, and I'm just going to see what sort of size that is, and then we'll bring the jar back in. So it could be that we just need to add a few more flowers actually to this. Okay, right, so I think we're pretty tidy on that one. Maybe just a little bit more clay here and there. Just press that one out. Okay, right, so we have that at the moment. I'm just going to flex the mould to take that out. Just going to pop that aside for the moment, bring back in our jar. Now obviously what you've got to remember is this isn't going to be pink, it will be painted in there. But let's just have a look to see what that looks like. That doesn't look too bad actually. I'm going to add a little bit more flowers to that, so I'm going to bring our mould back in. Okay, so that's where it fitted, sort of about there. Okay, so I'm just going to extend that by just pulling it over here and then just adding some more of the clay onto that. So this is how to extend this particular mould, just so we can have some more flowers on there. So again, just press the clay in and we'll see what that looks like. So if there's any little pegs that are coming up there, make sure they are clear. Okay, so just keep on pressing the clay in until you're happy that you've got everything. Okay, so again, just that little piece just there that needs filling in. Again, just press that clay into all the crevices that you can possibly find. Just go down to the little leaf there as well. Okay, pop the clay in, and we'll just pull that one out and we'll have a look and see how that looks. Okay, let's just bring our vase back in there, and possibly something like that. So what I'm doing now is just adding some more clay into the mould, and I just want to add a little bit of sort of like a flourish at this side as well, just to see what it looks like to start with. If I'm happy with it, then we'll just place that over the jar and let that one dry in place as well. So I'm just going to quickly just go here. This one needs probably a little bit more manipulating. I don't really want to get any fingerprints on the clay when I bend it, so this could or could not work. So again, I'm just getting rid of all the excess clay that's just sitting on top of the mould there. Okay, and make sure there's plenty of clay in the areas that we want, and then we'll position that over there. Got a couple of little gaps just there that need filling. Tuck the clay back inside. Okay, so we can clearly see the outer line of that mould. Okay, press that down, give that a little bit of a flex to get that clay piece out. So I'm just going to move that aside. Now is the time to just clean that up. I'm just going to snip out the branches there because I don't really want them. Okay, and the stems, there we go. Just give them a little bit more shape. Leaf there. Okay, so bringing this one back in, let's just have a look where we can sort of position that. I think I'll position it there, so I don't want to add too many fingerprints in. So let's just see if we can manipulate that one to stay in position. It's always difficult with the smaller pieces because there's less weight to actually hold everything in place. Okay, well, I'm going to leave it like that so you can see that is hopefully what will glue when that has all set. So I'm going to let it dry and then we'll come back to it, and I'll probably go over the entire lot using another sort of like colour I have, which is the Dusty Rose Impasto paint. So it's slightly lighter than the clay that's already on there. So now we're going to stick everything into position. On the back of these, you'll see it's got some indentations there, which are the ones that are actually on the frame. So they're going to lock in perfectly. So just find the position of those, which is about there. You can see that locks in perfectly. So I'm just going to use our trusty 3D gloss gel to actually stick those into position, and then I'll put the cling film back on just to hold it in position whilst it's drying. Okay, so let's just pop some of this out onto the back there. Okay, just spread that around. To there. Okay, don't apply too much because you don't want too much squeezing out. Okay, so again, just find those holes which are about there. Okay, and then press that one in. Okay, just give them a little bit of a press, and then if there's any glue that does sort of like spill out, then just go in there with another paintbrush and just take out all those pieces. Okay, so I use a tiny little paintbrush here just to go in there, nip those ones out. And then I did have a bit that snapped off, so there we go, that one's just going to be positioned there. So again, just some more of the gel. Just to spread that about, we'll just put a little bit on the end. Okay, and let's see if we can position that just where we want it. It's about there, which is perfect. Okay, again, if you've got any overspills, just go in there, take them off. spin around this side. Don't worry about this bit at the moment, this lifting up, because once the cling film is around, that will hold everything really, really tight. Again, we've got those holes, the indentation there. So let me just see if it's about there. So again, just using the glue. I've probably gone a bit over the top there, so I'm just going to pop some of that back in to the bottle, or a tube should I say. So I don't want too much to spill out, like I say. And just spread that around nice and thinly. Okay, like so. Make sure you've got it on the tips of all those leaves. Okay, right. So once again, I'm just going to spin that round until we find where those holes were, which was there. That perfectly slots in. And now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use the cling film once again to hold everything in position whilst it is drying. So maybe I'll go for the larger sheet this time. Let's have a look. So like so, and really pull that nice and tight. Okay, so it's really pushing down on all the areas, and just twist it back on itself like so, and then just use an elastic band just to hold the bit where you've tied off into position. So let me just go around there like so. Okay, now it's a case of just letting that dry, and that's going to take a couple of hours, and then we're going to come back and we're going to gild those beautiful flower elements, and the jar will be just about done. So just a little bit of the gold. I'm just going to pop that over some of the flowers there. So it's just a representation of a keep on just going there. We're just going to go with the two colours here. We're going to go for the gold and we're going to go for the copper, exactly as we did before. Okay, so just brush that gently on. Maybe some of this frame could also do with a little bit more gold, which I think it can. It's probably lost some by the looks of it. So I'm just going to add some more gold onto that, just to accentuate some of the detail there. It's looking nice. So just dry brush that on. Getting to all those little nooks and crannies down there, just adding to the detail. Okay, there we go. Like I say, the copper will dull that down a little bit as well. Now if you've got any overspill of the paint, the glue, now is the time to get that off before it's too late. Okay, and then back onto the main part we have down here. So I've got these, which are the Frantage from Stampendous. I've got the Aged Hunter and I've also got the Aged Green. I'm just looking there. I think probably I will go for the Aged Green because that seems to be the more sort of like green that actually works with the design in the middle there. I'm just trying to have a look, although both would probably work quite nicely, but I'm going to try and see if we can get this one to actually work on here. Okay, so what I'm going to be using to stick that is the Distress Resist spray, because that's a glue in its own right. I don't want to obviously spray it on, so I'm just undoing that. I'm just going to dab it in a couple of places. Okay, just onto here. Okay, and up onto the flowers. Okay, a little bit round there possibly. Okay, so it's just sort of like so. Okay, right, so once I've popped the glue on, I'm just going to get myself a piece of cardboard that I'm going to put underneath, because once you sprinkle this on, it's like an embossing powder, as I said, so it will go sort of everywhere. So we'll go for the aged green, so I'm just going to give that a little bit of a shake just to make sure we're going to get some of that green in there as well. Okay, so we're just going to sprinkle that on there. There we go. You can see that green coming through. Okay, that's nice. Okay, let's just tip the jar up to get rid of some of that excess. So there it is at the moment. Okay, we've got to heat that. This could be the rather interesting part, because we don't want to heat it too much, because we've got the paper clay underneath. Then it could start to bubble that up. So we have got to be fairly careful in this next process, but let's give it a go. So I'm just going to get my heat gun up to temperature first. Okay, and we're gonna do it quite carefully. Okay, just around there. So I'm not going to keep on one area for too long, if that makes sense. So you can see the gold is just melting. So just keep on moving it round. Okay, I started off with that heat tool. I think I'm going to go with a noisier one now. So there we go, that's just like adding a little bit of aging on there as well. I'm probably just going to go for a couple of bits up here as well. So I'm just going to turn that round. I'm just going to use the same glue again, so just pop that into there. Okay, just go in, just pop that in. Okay, possibly onto there as well. Because like I say, you don't want to spray with this, it's just purely just dabbing that on. So let's just get some going there as well, and a couple of little dots of it around. Once again, I'm just going to put the sheet of paper underneath using the same one, which is the aged green. I'm just going to pop that onto there. Okay, there we go. And then just very carefully just tip that off again. Give that a little bit of a tap, and then we'll heat that part as well. So I've now finished putting on all the Frantage embossing powder, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so it's just sort of like added to the overall aged look. I'm really quite pleased with that, actually, how that's worked. Right, so the last thing, the very last thing to go on there, well, I say the last thing, but you know what I'm like, I'll probably add some more, but is the heart up the very top there. So I'm just going to use some glue here, some silicone glue, just to pop that in, and we're just going to hide the seam there where that border around the top actually goes. So let's have a look. Okay, that looks good to me. Now, because we've got a little bit of glue that side of the heart and a little bit that side, I'm going to add a little bit more of the Frantage aged green onto that, and that's just then going to hide the fact that there's any glue there whatsoever. I will have to wait until this has dried before I then go and blast that one. Okay, so again, just tap that off, and you see now we've just like hidden the fact there's any glue there whatsoever, and a little bit more on this side. Okay, we probably want the the larger particles to go in there. Okay, nice. And then just up the top there, we're just going to give that a little bit of a squidge. I'm just going to use my tiny metal spatula. Okay, just grab some of that. Let's have a look. Again, a little bit more of the Frantage up the top there, just to hide all of that. Give it a little bit of a shake, give it a tap. So just a little bit around there, a little bit stuck to the heart as well, and I don't mind that. And I think we're just about done, so let's have a look. Okay, so I'm just going to wait until the glue just dries a little bit before I go and heat that Frantage, and then yes, we are actually done. So there is our finished upcycled coffee jar. And you know, just spinning that round, you can see there all the detail that's been added using the clay work with the embossing folders, the plaster paste that we use for the very first time, the moulded areas, and of course the beautiful rice paper that we started off with in the middle there way back. So that is my upcycled coffee jar. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you can join me again real soon. Thanks for watching.